Today, let's talk about income effect and substitution effect. A fall in the price of a good has two effects, income and substitution effect. We will discuss this in detail. Suppose the consumer purchases two goods, food and clothing, and assume that the price of food falls with the price of clothing remaining the same. Then, two changes can happen. Consumers can buy more of food as it has become relatively cheaper. He substitutes clothing for more food as it has become cheaper. This response of the consumer, as the price of one good has become cheaper, is the substitution effect. Another effect can also happen. As the price of food falls, the consumer is better off because he can buy the same amount of food and clothing with less money. This is because the price of food falls and the consumer thereby enjoys an increase in real purchasing power. An increase in real purchasing power means that the consumer enjoys more amount of goods and services with the same amount of money. So, this change in demand resulting from this change in real purchasing power is called the income effect. This is the basic idea of income and substitution effect. I'll explain this further on the basis of a diagram. First of all, keep in mind that a decrease in the price of food has both an income and substitution effect. In the figure, as can be seen, the consumer purchases two goods, food and clothing, and the consumer's initial budget line is RS. At the budget line RS, the consumer maximizes utility by choosing the market basket at A, thereby obtaining the level of utility associated with the indifference curve U1. He therefore purchases C1 units of clothing and F1 units of food. Now, let's see what happens if the price of food falls. The budget line rotates to RT as the price of food falls with the price of clothing remaining the same. So, at the new budget line RT, the consumer now chooses the market basket B on indifference curve U2. At market basket B, the consumer purchases C2 amount of clothing and F2 amount of food. Note that here market basket B was chosen even though market basket A was feasible and available to the consumer. As we studied in the theory of revealed preference, this means that the basket B is preferred to A. So, the consumer is able to increase his satisfaction by moving from A to B. At point A, the consumer purchased C1 amount of clothing and at point B, he reduced it to C2 amounts of clothing. At the same time, he purchased F1 amount of food at point A and the consumer increases his food consumption to F2. So, C1 C2 and F1 F2 is the total change in the consumption of the market baskets A and B. So, this is the total effect of consumption of a decline in the price of food. Now, we will see how much of this is price effect and how much of it is substitution effect, etc. First, let's discuss substitution effect. As we can see, as the price of the food fell, the consumption of the same increased. The substitution effect captures the change in food consumption that occurs as a result of this price change. We can see how we can graphically isolate substitution and income effect. For that, we need to draw a budget line parallel to the new budget line RT. We draw the budget line in a parallel way so that the slope of both these budget lines are similar, that is, we are making the price ratios similar for these lines. This newly constructed budget line is tangential to the original indifference curve U1, holding the level of satisfaction constant. So, we draw this new budget line to differentiate between income and substitution effect. Given that budget line, the consumer chooses market basket D and consumes OE units of food. The line segment F1E thus represents the substitution effect. Here, to differentiate between substitution and income effects, what we did was we drew another budget line so as to take away the increase in real income of the consumer. But in this new budget line, we held the slope constant with respect to the budget line RT. A substitution effect is the change in consumption of a good associated with the change in its price, with the level of utility held constant. The substitution effect essentially captures the change in food consumption that occurs as a result of the price change in food. The utility is held constant, which means here we assume that there isn't an increase in real income. So, the figure makes it clear that when the price of food declines, the substitution effect always leads to an increase in the quantity of food demanded. Now, let's discuss the income effect. In income effect, we look at the change in food consumption brought about by the increase in real purchasing power. That is, the change in food consumption due to an increase in real income. Here, the relative prices are held constant. Here, from the imaginary budget line, when the budget line shifts to RT, we can see that the consumer moves to indifference curve U2 or from market basket D in indifference curve U1 to B in indifference curve U2. This is because the lower price of food has increased the consumer's level of utility. The increase in food consumption from OE to OF2 is the measure of the income effect because it reflects a movement from one indifference curve to another. The income effect measures the change in consumers' purchasing power. So, in short, the income effect is the change in consumption of a good resulting from an increase in purchasing power with the relative prices held constant. So, the total effect of a change in price is given theoretically by the sum of the substitution effect and the income effect. So, total effect, that is F1, F2, is the sum of substitution effect, which is F1E, and income effect, that is EF2. I hope this is clear. Thank you.